Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Test Case Scenario. I am Jason Baum. With me, as always, why don't you all introduce yourselves? It's been a while since you all got to introduce yourselves and say literally one thing about yourselves. Let's just start with Evelyn.
Hi, my name is Evelyn Coleman, and you can't see, but Jason and I are wearing matching shirts today.
Fun fact, we are going to be out on video. How old am I? We're going to be out on recorded image very soon. No, is that not what they call it these days? What do the kids call it, Evelyn?
Streaming.
You're laughing at me.
YouTube.
TikTok.
Stream. Oh God. Okay, fine. We're gonna be out soon on whatever you're on YouTube. So look for us there very soon, and then you'll be able to see our t-shirts.
All right, I'll go. Marcus Merrill, Vice President of Technology Strategy at Sauce Labs, and I'm moving to the Bay Area in about 6 weeks.
Hooray. All right, Nikolai, you're up.
Nikolai Volotkin, developer advocate here at Sauce Labs, and I wish I was moving to the Bay Area with Marcus.
Thanks, Nikolai. And on today's episode, we're going to tackle a topic that's been the subject of many debates within the testing community. Your test automation strategy is not your test strategy. It's a really interesting topic. We'll be discussing subtle yet crucial differences between those two concepts, how they interplay, the potential pitfalls of conflating the two. So let's just start with our first question. And I'll just put this out to, I'm not going to choose who goes. You just jump in, but explain the key differences between a test automation strategy and a comprehensive test strategy. Nikolai.
Well, okay, a test strategy, I think, is how an individual or a team of individuals decides to validate that their software is of sufficient quality to release a production. Does their software do the things they want it to do? And does it do it without enough issues that their users would enjoy? So creating methods of validating those kinds of behaviors, I believe that's a test strategy. And I think a test strategy can encompass numerous types of testing, functional testing where you exercise stuff on the application, accessibility testing, performance testing, load testing, and so on. There's many different types that you can apply. And I think a piece of that included is an automation strategy, right? You don't have to automate all of your testing, like your accessibility to your UX testing, for example. That's hard to automate, but you can automate portions of it that you find are inefficient, where you want to go faster, where you want to be more repeatable. You can have an automation strategy inside of your test strategy. What do you all think?
Yeah,
Marcus?
but that sounds good to me. I think I don't tend to get real pedantic about the whole checking versus testing subject that is sort of this endless debate within some parts of the community. But I do think there is a distinction between testing and checking. So your automation is like an extension of what you're trying to do with testing. It isn't your actual testing. You're not, when you do automation, you're not, really, testing to me is finding out whether or not something met requirements, finding out whether or not your users are having a delightful experience when they're trying to go through the product, if they're able to get their work done. It's very qualitative. And at some point, there's going to be kind of an opinion expressed, whereas all you can have a computer do is check a series of facts to see whether they are still the same as they were when you told them what to check. So very, very different things. To me, when you're talking about a test automation strategy, it implies that you've already decided that you understand where does the human belong in this process and where should we obviate the human from the process and remove some of the toil from testing. And that way, when you've decided all that, then your automation strategy is, how do I put the best tools and the best budgeting and the best personnel to use to get the maximum benefit out of what the computer does well. But if we were going to be a little bit pedantic, we'd say the automated checking strategy, not testing strategy. That makes sense.
Interesting. Evelyn, what do you think?
I don't disagree. I was listening to you both trying to come up with, some kind of like metaphor or something, as I always do. And I was thinking like the comprehensive test strategy is like what Nikolai was saying about getting across the line, right? Like you're getting something from pre-production to production. So say it's a marathon, even 26 something miles that you have to get from point A to point B. And the test strategy, like if you chose to run from point A to point B, there are certainly some strategies and some things you can do to improve your running and make you get there faster. And if you chose to walk or roll or get there some other way, I'm sure there's some strategies for how to walk 26 miles the best way. And then I'm sure if you wanted to do a combination of different types of modalities to get across the finish line, which is, I think, what most people choose when it comes to their comprehensive test strategy, right? Sometimes a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Then that's you, like what Marcus said, choosing the best combination of options to get across the finish line. So we focus a lot on just, the test automation, but there's definitely lots of best strategies for manual testing and best strategies for checking things and all sorts of stuff that doesn't get quite as much coverage.
So let's talk about test automation strategy a little bit. We covered it, on a previous episode, went pretty in depth. But how do you ensure your test automation strategy is aligned with your broader test strategy? Marcus, you're nodding your head, so you have to go.
Yeah, all right. I'm thinking, because it's I don't have a crisp soundbite of an answer, but I think that it, like, to me, it starts with making sure that you're not off on your own in a silo. Or a lot of the first years of my test automation career were done where I basically kind of had my own agenda. I was working at my own initiative. And after a few months of work, I was kind of like patting myself on the back. Aren't I doing a great job? And then I found out that really nobody in my company understood what I was doing. They sort of trusted that I've got it handled, And at one point, it kind of became clear that we were scoring victories right and left. We were catching regressions. We were running a tight ship. And yet nobody was really benefiting. And then I found out at some point that there was a whole team of manual people that were doing exactly the same thing that we did in our automated testing. They didn't know we were automating because we didn't do a good job of aligning ourselves and communicating back with them. I'm not going to say I've seen our customers do that or people in the industry do that, but it can't just have been me that was that far off. I see automation teams in a corner all the time. So that's not a holistic answer, but that's certainly one aspect of how you can get alignment.
Marcus, I think that's a wonderful answer. I actually didn't expect you to go that route at all. And when you started talking, it all started clicking in my head as well. So that was really great, because to me, actually, whenever we talk to customers, and a lot of our work, I think, is helping them to understand how to create a better automation strategy, sometimes a test strategy, and so on. And one way I personally gauge the quality of automation and the maturity of automation on a team, and this is all coming from similar experiences you, Marcus, is, are those automation teams integrated as part of the entire software development organization? Because where I've seen the most success is where the automation actually becomes part of, as Evelyn's metaphor, if we're running a marathon, there might be numerous people that you need to be helping along the way. And if we're all, I guess, trying to help cross it as a team, that's how you get alignment, at least one way.
Yeah.
I also thought Marcus was going in a different direction than I initially thought he was. I'm going to maybe take a little bit of a different route, because, you both have some really wicked experience with actually being hands-on with test automation. I guess from my perspective, I wonder about resource management. I guess it's similar to what Marcus was saying, but are we spending the not just necessarily money, but like our resources and our time and efforts in the adequate places? Like if automation is what's going to get you 90% to the finish line and the rest is that 10%, have we taken a look at, you know, how important each aspect of it is? Maybe some of the things in that 10% are like absolutely critical to getting you across that finish line. So are we giving those things the right resources? Are we giving them the same benefit of the doubt? Are we making those folks work in a silo, but we're making everybody else work with the engineers? So I would wonder about from like how we're organized and how we're spending our time and resource management perspective, just because I have less experience with the actual coding.
Right. Well, I think another thing that both of all of our points bring up is just this notion of how quick or short the career is of a typical QA automation engineer. And I think companies sort of set an automation strategy and don't revisit it very often. And meanwhile, people who get into test automation who are good at it almost invariably get poached into feature development, and they get starting to write code. They get pulled into development and they stop doing automation. I would say, I mean, I'm just going to just a ballpark my guess at the average tenure of a person that's doing automation is under 2 years before they go into feature development. They someone else comes in and they're starting to do it. So you have so much turnover. There isn't as much institutional knowledge. And so the strategy that was set a long time ago may not make sense. You're just sort of doing the same thing that your predecessor did. And you're not revisiting that, to your point, Evelyn, that it really, that's something that changes constantly within an organization. Every one of the elements that you just mentioned. And this needs to be revisited alongside it.
So that's my next question then. How important is it to regularly review and revise your test automation strategy? And how often should you be doing it?
I don't have an answer for how often. I would just say that the risk of not revisiting it very often, or not revisiting it, I'll throw out once a year. Well, let's say once a year. The risk of not bringing a whole bunch of stakeholders, and I mean like dev architects and people who are actually important to the process of developing software, not just people in quality assurance. But the risk of not doing that is that poor soul. I think I've told the story 3 times now. I met at Selenium conference who has 15,000 Selenium tests, 30% of which fail every build. That's someone who is not revisiting their strategy at a holistic or high enough level.
Jason, ask your question a different way. Are there markers that would signal to a business that it would be time to revisit their test automation strategy? Because, sometimes it's not a matter of yearly or monthly, but if your business is doing A-okay, maybe you're all right, but there's might be some other indicators like failed tests.
Yeah. Great point.
To me, something markers that come to mind: are you happy with the quality of your software when it's being released? Like, are your users complaining a lot, or are they happy with it? Are you happy with the velocity at which you develop and release software? If not, maybe the automation strategy could potentially be a bottleneck, and maybe a right one could speed you up. That's all I got for now.
Points. Fantastic points.
So continuing to talk about test automation, what role does test automation play in agile development and CI/CD environments?
I feel like, I'm biased, but I feel like you can't really be doing either of those things effectively without automated testing. Is there general agreement from the employees of the test vendor here?
I learned about, bias, right? Like I learned
automated testing.
I learned about CI/CD through the lens of test automation because of my career at Sauce. And so I learned much later that there were things in the CI pipeline, like building the environment and things that had little to do with launching the tests. Well, you need them for the tests, but other items in that pipeline that didn't have to do with like a regular Selenium or Appium test or something like that. So I'd agree with Marcus. From my perspective, it seems pretty important since I had no idea what else you would do with it. Besides that, Nikolai probably could tell me. Nikolai, if you have a CI pipeline with no tests, what does it do?
It's like a test in the woods. If it falls, like,
well, I mean, I'll let Nikolai answer. I mean,
if you have a CI pipeline with no tests,
what is it? Just build the development
yeah, I guess it
environment?
just builds and deploys the software. I guess you could have a stage where it deploys the software to like your dev or QA environment, and then there goes a manual testing cycle, and that takes a certain amount of time. And then when you get the approval, it moves on to the next stage. Yeah, that's probably pretty common actually in a lot of maybe larger, slower moving orgs.
Yeah.
That seems really manual that you would have to click a button to get it to progress. Is that really CI/CD?
No, it's not. It's definitely not, but no.
Yeah. Well, I'm learning here.
Maybe it's CI, right? The partially CI, right? Because it is if there's a pipeline that's integrated into continuous deployment tool, that's a continuous integration part. I guess. I guess maybe the question is, do you have to have tests as part of continuous integration? And I think no.
Yeah, I think strictly speaking, no, but I would raise my eyebrows if I actually, to me, if you didn't have any tests in your CI pipeline and you actually deploy to production without anything in there at all, and you're also not using feature flags or canary builds, then I'm just gonna.
You're a mad person.
I'm gonna back away slowly.
Would it be fair to say that if you didn't have any of those things at that point, you might as well just have like a big red button, deploy button in the middle of your room, and then like Office, and whenever you feel like things are ready, you just hit the big red button?
Yeah, your big red button is the word git commit or git push. That's your red button, and it just happens.
So we spent a lot of time on test automation. And obviously test automation is incredibly important. And we would be remiss not to talk about how important it is. That's why we spent an entire episode talking about it already. And I don't want to talk about it for an entire other episode. And so there are other tests that make up your test strategy. The whole point of this episode. What would you say is the ideal ratio of like automated testing to manual testing in a test strategy? And why?
It's so hard to pick a ratio without any context. I think I kind of question the question, honestly.
Well, give me a scenario, and then what would the ratio be? Like,
have you seen? Are you familiar with the test automation pyramid or the test pyramid?
Tell us a little bit about it.
So the pyramid is it has a few layers. Just imagine. So it's not really a pyramid; it's a triangle. Let's call it a triangle. Imagine.
Yeah, it's better than pyramid. It makes me think of pyramid schemes not going a good way. Right. Let's.
We should start one of those, by the way. Yeah. Anyway,
okay. Side topic.
So just put a pin in that. So imagine a triangle that's split up into sort of say 4 horizontal lines, blocks. So each block is like a trapezoid, except for the top one, which is the triangle. The bottom one is the biggest and widest one, and usually that's we identify that little space as unit tests, which is you should have the highest quantity of unit tests overall. The unit tests are kind of the bread and butter of testing, and that's where everything sort of goes back to, the first sign of trouble is going to be there if a test fails. What I've seen, teams usually say that if a single unit test, even if there are 100,000 of them, single unit test fails, the whole build breaks, start over. Move up one level to the integration test, which is where you're saying, I'm going to have a single microservice, or I'm going to have my area of the code gingerly start to talk to other areas of the code that I didn't write. Whereas a unit test is entirely focused on a single piece of code. An integration test is focused on talking to other pieces of code that are commonly needed for interaction. And it occupies the next space up in the triangle, saying that there's fewer of them, but there's still a lot. Then one further trapezoid up would be the automated functional test, where you get into Selenium, Cypress, Puppeteer, Playwright, Test Cafe, Appium, XUI, Espresso. I'll name all the frameworks. And those are the ones that actually depend on the entire app being deployed with all the microservices, and you're going to run a browser or mobile test against those services. And there's going to be fewer of those than there are integration or unit tests. So you just sort of keep going up the pyramid. And then at the very top is manual testing. There should be the fewest number of manual tests because they typically take the longest, and they are absolutely gatekeeping your release if you choose to set things up that way. So when we talk about the test pyramid, I can't really give you a ratio, but I could say that the rough shape of a triangle, however you want to think of it that way, that's what it's going to be like. Manual testing is going to be the top, which means not very much.
Thanks, Marcus. Nikolai, are you going to give me a ratio?
Yeah, I was going to tell you that from our conclusive data of 5 billion tests executed, 92% automation, 8% manual is the solution. No,
beautiful. Thank you.
Boom. What you want to address, everyone, please apply that in all of your strategies. I'm totally joking.
Cut the last 3 minutes of the podcast.
Yeah. I was going to add a little bit more confusion and confusion to Marcus's answer, because yes, there is the automation pyramid, also, or a triangle, whatever shape you want to imagine. In, I think, a front-end development world of developing web applications, a few years ago, actually, Kent Dodds, a very popular, famous software developer, super amazing guy, introduced the test automation trophy. So now if you just imagine a trophy with a little base and a thicker middle, and so the base is like their static testing, but then the middle, it has some unit tests, but similar quantity in width and height are also integration tests. So now it's saying almost like, yes, unit tests are important, but they're not the most important. Maybe they're just as important as integration tests. And so at least in the front end development world, and then yes, on top is the manual testing, still a little piece that's gated. But again, it just kind of shows that it's hard to apply this ratio, because maybe you're developing a mobile app and everything that we just talked about is less applicable there, or a web application. Now you have to think about what you're going to do there.
But you would generally have more automation than manual. No, I'm wrong.
It depends on the thing that you're testing, right? Like games and things.
Yeah.
People have a lot of folks that are running the games and looking, like, isn't that testing, manual testing in a way? And I don't know, I think it just depends. And then there's user testing, right? Where you give it to users. So if you took user acceptance testing or beta testing and added that to even if you had a very small pool of manual testers that were doing like traditional manual testing, I would say it would, and it might even end up even if you took every single conclusive action that a beta or user acceptance or first iteration person that had the app added that to your manual testers, and then compared that side to side by all of your automated tests. Wouldn't it be about even?
So can an overemphasis on test automation potentially compromise the broader objectives of a test strategy?
Yes, absolutely it can. People, if they fundamentally misunderstand what automation is good at and what humans are good at, you can, I've seen people get it backwards. They automate these really big, long, complex 200 command scripts, and then they have their manual users do these real short, sharp. We did this at my last company where the humans were doing 50, 60 tests a day manually. They're 5-minute little tests that just go over they do them every single week on Thursday before the release train goes out. And it's a terrible use of manual testers, because you're not really using their brain at all. You're just having them go through a series of steps and check the box. And after the 50th time they've run a single test, they're not really paying attention anymore. Whereas a computer will pay perfect attention. The human is when you are sort of expecting the unexpected. You need someone's judgment to be there to say, this just doesn't feel right, or this is not the way a user would do things. And so a fundamental misunderstanding of those two different concepts will definitely bite you.
Just to throw out one thing I read a while back that I think kind of makes sense. In the book How Google Tests Software, they talked about how when Google tries to develop like some MVPs or some like proof of concepts of a product, they don't even do any testing. They kind of just write the code and release something and try it out really quickly, get some feedback. And then if it starts to be good, you start adding tests and making sure it's scalable and works well and continues to work well because users have accepted it. Because otherwise, if you're doing like an MVP or a POC and you put something out into the wild and they don't like it, you just wasted a bunch of time writing tests for something that nobody's going to use. And that's money, of course, for a company.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where we get into the real importance of things like experimentation and A/B testing. If you got some functionality that is fairly rock solid, like you've tested it well enough, but you need to do a slight tweak to it to find out if it creates, conversion lift or some improvement to the user experience that you can measure in the analytics or monitoring, then we have a customer who's a very, very prominent social media site, and they kind of shocked some people at Sauce when they said, yeah, we do a lot of manual testing, but only on those experiments. We don't want to design an automated test suite for something that may not see the light of day once we promote it, to production. So,
yeah, this is really great. Evelyn, I don't know, did you want to add to that question? Sorry.
No.
No. Okay. No, because what you're kind of going and giving some examples. I was going to say, since we don't have a lot of time left, I think that's a good final question is, like what other best practices or examples can you share for successfully integrating test automation within like a broader test strategy while maintaining that balance with manual testing?
I think I want to give an example from my career because I'm proud of this example and my employer was proud of it. And I think it kind of paints a good picture of what you asked, Jason. So I was part of a team doing automated testing for an organization. And we started out kind of as a silo. Hey, you all are automation, go do your work, automate stuff. And over time, there was a huge team of maybe like 30 manual testers. And then there was a team of us, like 5 engineers. Over time, what I was doing was going to the manual testers and trying to figure out what their needs are, and going to our director of quality assurance, figuring out where his gaps are. And I was trying to unify all of us in the same like vision and objectives. And so I thought of our team as a product that we're offering the entire organization to make their lives easier. And so that to me was a great path. And if I think of automation in that way, I feel like the decisions that you would make would lead you in the right direction.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, similarly, I worked on an issue at my previous company where the manual steps to doing something, to doing this one particular check, were extremely difficult. And it just never really occurred to them to think that something was automatable. Like, they just didn't understand that this is something that can be done. And so once we started working together and showed them the process, we developed a whole suite of things that ended up, I mean, really, it turned us, I felt like, and I'd be curious, Nikolai, to see if you had a similar experience. I felt like it turned the corner for test automation and maybe even QA. We were always thought of as a cost center and a sort of a necessary evil. And it turned us into a strategic partner and almost in a way, a protector of revenue. Did you have the same experience?
That's so funny you mentioned that. It's a very similar experience, Marcus. We actually were a government organization working with other government organizations. Other government organizations wanted to start using our services. And so we actually became we kind of started building a moat around our organization with what we had done, and, protecting business and also getting more business.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an amazing feeling when it happens, and it allows you as a QA person to do something you don't really normally get to do, which is sort of take a seat at the table and have real input into how things go. Because I think that a lot of QA folks just don't have much agency, and having a victory like that can give you agency, and it's something that I think everyone should be going for all the time.
Awesome. What about you, Evelyn?
Oh, I was just listening. I didn't want to ruin these like beautiful moments from people's past that they give me goosebumps, honestly. I just love hearing about how testing can like be a real part of the business and how it can be instrumental to producing or saving revenue. I don't, like Marcus said, I don't think enough people have a seat at the table when it comes to that. And then I was just thinking a lot about automation in general, not just test automation, and how to what Nikolai said, it should serve us and remove the things that don't make sense for us to do if it could be automated, whether it's a test or a slide or taking out the trash.
I wish I could automate that. Someone needs to take out my trash, please.
No,
I think that's why you have kids, right? I think that's the automation there.
Facts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask one question before we go here? Because I feel like we've set up such a beautiful scenario and vision of something, and I don't want to leave without maybe asking you, Marcus, like, we've had some wonderful experiences, and we've seen some, and we've experienced ourselves and seen some not so wonderful experiences. How can we help others to go and create similar types of, I don't want to say the word experience again because I just said it like 10 times.
No, one more time. One more time.
How do you gain agency as a QA tester?
Yeah, how do we help people?
Yeah.
Well, what do you? I don't know, even know what that takes.
I mean, that's what this is all about, right? I mean, that's why
Yeah.
we make these shows.
Well, I think
Yeah.
I've said it. I think I've said it on this podcast before. It's sort of a crusade I'm on right now. It's just that we should identify always. We should always be identifying the areas of risk that our tests should be covering. Our CEO Alan Miles, he asked me at one point. He was like, "What do you think the most important thing is that every CEO thinks about?" And I said, "Probably risk." And he said, "Absolutely. Everything I think about, everything that keeps me up at night, has to do with risk." And the time I gained agency at my previous company, it was because our analytics that fundamentally were the thing that tracked how our commissions got paid out from our customers, our vendors. Those were not being, there was a mathematical error that was preventing them from being evaluated correctly. That's the bug I found and figured out how to automate to make sure it would never happen again. And my CEO knew my name from that day forth, and he would know me on the street now at a 1,000+ person plus. And so I think that identifying risk areas, identifying the most important workflows for your users, and making sure that if you ever catch a bug in those, that you amplify, you raise it up the flagpole, and you make sure everyone knows that quality assurance is the reason that this thing was there. It's a little bit more self-serving than I intended it to be, but that's the idea, is gain agency through risk management, not through code coverage. That's my soundbite.
So I think I hear you saying that we need to look at it from a business perspective. And instead of a technical, hey, let me get in and click buttons and follow these steps, let me think of it as a business. What are the risks that the businesses could be facing, and how do I help mitigate those risks?
Yeah.
And hence I will serve the business, create value, and potentially be recognized by the CEO on the streets.
Yeah, I mean, at my last job, I went in there and they said, "You're a good fit for this job because we are embarking on a project to build Selenium test scripts with Java and TestNG. That's an appropriate technology choice. Go to it." And that was great. It worked out great. They had figured out their strategy. 3 years later, I was in a different team, different area of the company, and this guy came in who was Nightwatch JavaScript, and he rewrote every single test script I had written in Java, just because that was he was a tools first guy, not a strategy first guy. He said, "Here's the thing I know. I'm going to apply it to perfectly good test scripts and throw out 3 years worth of work just because it's the thing I know. And I see that kind of behavior all the time. And it drives me insane because it's a tools first approach, not a strategy first approach.
Yeah, I think what you're both saying is the same thing we always talk about when it comes to strategy. It's really easy when you're strategizing for your team, your test strategy, whatever it is, to think very much about yourselves and what works for you. But when you can apply your strategy across the entire business and solve problems for the business, that's when you're going to be successful.
Yep.
Yeah.
And isn't that the point of every single role at the company anyway?
Should
right?
be.
It's like that's every single person at every company is there to figure out what the goal of the business is and help to solve challenges and avoid risk.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think due to the fleeting nature of the QA career that I was talking about earlier, I think this stuff just doesn't get passed down the way it should between successions, from person to person.
Yeah. Well, I hate to cut the conversation short because I think this is a really good conversation. I think we started getting deep there at the end, but really helpful. I really appreciate the conversation, Marcus, Nikolai, Evelyn, as always. And thank you for listening. Hope you found this to be valuable. Ping us, message us, community-hub@saucelabs.com. And would love to hear your thoughts and see if you have any questions on any of the topics that we have talked about over the past few weeks. Stay tuned for more episodes. Look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Until then, cheers.